Jimmy Kimmel Live returned to the late-night lineup last night, nearly 1 week after ABC pulled the show off the air amid controversy over Kimmel's comments over the assassination of Charlie Kirk. In an emotional opening monologue, Kimmel addressed the remarks that led to his suspension while fiercely defending free speech and criticizing the Trump administration over what he called anti-American attacks on the First Amendment.
I've been hearing a lot about what I need to say and do tonight, and the truth is, I don't think what I have to say is going to make much of a difference. If you like me, you like me. If you don't, you don't. I have no illusions about changing anyone's mind. But I do want to make something clear because it's important to me as a human, and that is, you understand that it was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man. I don't think there's anything funny about it. I posted a message on Instagram on the day he was killed, sending love to his family and asking for compassion, and I meant it, and I still do. Nor was it my intention to blame any specific group for the actions of what it was obviously a deeply disturbed individual. That was really the opposite of the point I was trying to make, but I understand that to some that felt either ill-timed or unclear, or maybe both. And for those who think I did point a finger, I get why you're upset. If the situation was reversed, there's a good chance I'd have felt the same way. I have many friends and family members on the other side who I love and remain close to, even though we don't agree on politics at all. I don't think the murderer who shot Charlie Kirk represents anyone. This was a sick person who believed violence was a solution, and it isn't. This show is not important. What is important is that we get to live in a country that allows us to have a show like this. Yeah. I've had the opportunity to meet and spend time with comedians and talk show hosts from countries like Russia, countries in the Middle East, who tell me they would get thrown in prison for making fun of those in power, and worse than being thrown in prison. They know how lucky we are here. Our freedom to speak is what they admire most about this country. And that's something I'm embarrassed to say I took for granted until they pulled my friend Stephen off the air and tried to coerce the affiliates who run our show in the cities that you live in to take my show off the air. That's not legal. That's not American. That is un-American. The President of the United States made it very clear he wants to see me and the hundreds of people who work here fired from our jobs. Our leader celebrates Americans losing their livelihoods because he can't take a joke. He was somehow able to squeeze Colbert out of CBS. Then he turned his sights on me, and now he's openly rooting for NBC to fire Jimmy Fallon and Seth Meyers and the hundreds of Americans who work for their shows who don't make millions of dollars. And I hope that if that happens, or if there's even any hint of that happening, you will be 10 times as loud as you were this week. We have to speak out against this.
Many households across America, however, were unable to watch Kimmel's return last night. Speaking of those affiliates, Nexstar and Sinclair, two major TV station owners who together account for roughly 70 ABC affiliates in the U.S., continued to preempt the late-night show, despite Disney bringing it back nationally. Both groups are also pursuing major business moves that would require FCC approval. Sinclair, of course, is exploring merger options, while Nexstar is trying to close a $6.2 billion merger with another big station owner, Tegna. I told you about this last week at the time when Kimmel was first canceled. It's all prompting Democratic lawmakers to push back and demand more answers about why the station groups are refusing to air Kimmel's show. In a letter first obtained by NBC News, 4 Democratic senators asked the corporate heads of both companies how their decisions, quote, may relate to regulatory issues pending with the Trump administration. The senators added, quote, if you suspended a late-night comedian show in part to seek regulatory favors from the administration, you've not only assisted the administration in eroding First Amendment freedoms, but also create the appearance of a possible quid pro quo arrangement that could implicate federal anti-corruption laws. The lawmakers are requesting answers from Nexstar and Sinclair by October 7th. We mentioned Unga was in town in New York. President Trump criticized the United Nations and his European allies in an hour-long speech to the General Assembly. The president delivered the address yesterday morning at the UN headquarters in New York City. He touted America's success under his leadership, questioned the purpose of the UN itself, blamed the organization for uncontrolled migration, and more.
What is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it. It has such tremendous, tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war. Not only is the UN not solving the problems it should, too often, it's actually creating new problems for us to solve. The best example is the #1 political issue of our time, the crisis of uncontrolled migration. It's uncontrolled. Your countries are being ruined. The United Nations is funding an assault on Western countries and their borders. I'm the President of the United States, but I worry about Europe. I love Europe. I love the people of Europe. And I hate to see it being devastated by energy and immigration. This double-tailed monster destroys everything in its wake, and they cannot let that happen any longer. You're doing it because you want to be nice. You want to be politically correct, and you're destroying your heritage.
A lot for us to dig into with the host of Cosmopolitics on Substack, Elise Labott. Elise, thanks for coming on with us this morning. You called the president's speech at the UN yesterday tone deaf and called it a missed opportunity. Why?
Yeah, I mean, Ali, it reminds me of when Fidel Castro or Muammar Gaddafi used to come to the UN and give long, rambling speeches that didn't have a message. I mean, you remember, usually presidents, world leaders are coming to kind of lay out this vision of U.S. policy, U.S. leadership in the world. And, there was a lot of talk about President Trump coming to the UN to give the UN a reckoning. And, he had a couple of themes of energy and migration, but there was no prescription. There was no, policy ideas. There was just like a big rant. And it wasn't incoherent. It was like a word salad. And so I think that had he come and said, listen, I think you need reform. And we all know the UN needs reform. And we've been talking about it for years, Ali. But at the same time, there were no ideas. There was just a big rant. And I think it was, that's not how you win allies. That's not how you get cooperation. And, every year at the UN, you kind of hope that President Trump is going to, during the first term and now, kind of rise to the occasion and articulate world leadership on the world stage. But unfortunately, we didn't really see that yesterday.
Yeah, and we had one of the Biden administration UN ambassadors on the show yesterday sort of previewing this. We knew that reforming the UN was going to be a central focus, as it often is, and yet you had the president standing up in front of other countries saying that their borders are going to hell and that their countries are going to hell, and that if only they did things the way that he was doing them, then their countries would thrive again, as he sees America doing. There was, I think, the domestic focus that he made, but then also multiple international conflicts looming over this United Nations session, specifically around Ukraine. I think Trump had a shift yesterday that was important, specifically talking about how he thinks that Ukraine can win back all of its territory that's been taken by Russia. What do you see in this shifting of his stance here? It was surprising, but the White House has told our teams it's meant to put more pressure on Putin.
Well, I think this is the policy that European leaders and certainly President Zelensky, who President Trump met with yesterday, was looking for. Like, the unfortunate thing is he keeps changing his mind so many times. And if he's saying that NATO should go after Russia, and let's be clear, Russia is testing NATO, whether it's putting drones in Ukraine or, incursions, drones into Estonia. He's testing the limits, and NATO countries have been, kind of patient. But if President Trump is saying, yes, NATO countries should go after them, are these countries going to say President Trump will have our back, or the next day will he change his mind, given the relationship between Vladimir Putin, the meeting in Alaska, and his reluctance to really push Putin? I think, Trump's word is a little bit unreliable at this point.
Yeah, I think the unpredictability is so important, and it also factors into the way that people are thinking about the U.S. role in ending the ongoing conflict in Gaza. He criticized the countries that recognize Palestinian statehood in the days leading up to the United Nations. In the roughly minute that we have left here, Elise, what did you see in the way he reacted to that move and the way that the UN writ large can help bringing an end to this war?
Well, I don't think the UN recognition is really going to have an effect. I mean, this is a state in name only. It doesn't create all the conditions for a state. President Trump did meet with a group of Arab nations yesterday to talk about the U.S. plan for the way forward, whether it's reconstruction, Palestinian governance, and other things like that. What's really missing is this pressure on Netanyahu, and President Trump, according to diplomats I spoke to, say that he knows that annexing the West Bank in retaliation for this recognition would be a red line for a lot of these Arab countries that are in the Abraham Accords or have relations with Israel. And so he really is kind of send the message to Netanyahu on Friday when they meet about not taking that extra step and inflaming tensions even further.
Yeah, still many more world leader speeches to watch. Zelensky this morning, Netanyahu later on in the week. Elise Labott, we'll leave it there. Thank you for coming on with us.